Join us this new year for new conversations at the Commonwealth Club.
Welcome to the Michelle Meow Show at the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm John Zipper, the club's Vice President of Media and Editorial, and Michelle's co-host for this program. Thank you for joining us today for this event. We're going to be featuring the filmmaker Deborah Souza Silva and Reverend Wanda Johnson discussing the new documentary Black Mothers, Love and Resist and the issues covered in it. First, a quick note, the Commonwealth Club is producing hundreds of programs a year, even during the pandemic. We're doing programs that are online, like this one today, as well as in-person events. So head over to commonwealthclub.org/MMS for more upcoming programs, as well as video and audio of past events. If you're watching us live on YouTube, go ahead and put in some questions for our speakers during this program. We'll bring up some of them during our discussion. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Meow. She's the producer and the host of the Michelle Meow Show and a member of the Commonwealth Club's Board of Governors. Good to see you again, Michelle.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon for a special conversation about the film Black Mothers, Love and Resist. The world premiere, by the way, is happening this Friday, April 29th, during the San Francisco Film Festival. Let me introduce to you our speakers this afternoon. We have the director of the film, Deborah Souza Silva, who is a Black Afro-Brazilian journalist and filmmaker. Her work examines systemic racism and inequality. We also have Reverend Wanda Johnson, a mother, activist, and speaker with a long history of community organizing and speaking to equity. When her son, Oscar Grant III, was killed by an Oakland BART transit officer on January 1st, 2009, she has embarked on a journey to turn that pain into purpose. Wanda is also CEO of the Oscar Grant Foundation and is a licensed and ordained minister. Before we begin our discussion, let's play the trailer for Black Mothers, Love and Resist.
It's scary to be a mother of a Black son.
A young man severely beaten, and his mom says it was Troy police that are responsible.
He see a tall white officer came and just kicked him in the face. He don't remember nothing after then, so I'm guessing he went unconscious. I wanted people to just see it.
Ain't no way you can explain what I seen in my son. Wasn't no way you can explain it. I'm lucky to have Ulysses alive because a lot of mothers don't have their son.
My son was murdered. He was murdered. He was murdered.
You go through the steps of grief, but you have to turn your pain into purpose.
Good morning, ladies. Good morning. Thank you for celebrating the Oscar Grant legacy with me.
It's going to take you to go to that police station and tell them they need to find out who killed your child.
I can't get him no help that he need while he there because I'm afraid one day it's going to get too much for it.
I lift up my sister Angela to you in the name of Jesus.
This is a sorority that we didn't pledge for. Whenever we get together, it's the opportunity for us to empower, inspire, and uplift one another.
Let it out. Oh, that feels good.
And it helps being connected with other mothers. That's what helps.
I'm available. You guys can call me.
I'm sorry for what happened to your son.
Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to your son, too. I'm not used to speaking in front of people, and I was trying to wonder if you had any advice. You might give up on my son, but I'm not going to give up on my son at all. I'm telling you, make this thing big, don't let it die.
She took it upon herself, and that's what these Black mothers are doing. They understand that the battle is theirs.
To hear that the Troy Police Department been hiding footage is dead wrong, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Undeterred by a global pandemic, an anticipated crowd of 70,000 marched on Washington on Friday.
Black lives matter, and we won't stop until it matters to everybody.
I'm here because enough is enough. How many more have to die?
We can change some of the laws that are before us if we band together.
One day I'm gonna be up there.
Come on, fight for it, because nobody's gonna know your child name unless you say something. If you don't say nothing about it, they will not know. Fight for it. Come on.
Deborah, Reverend Wanda, thank you so much for being here with us, and thank you for this film. Let's start with you, Deborah. Let's start with, how this film came to be. I think for me as a viewer, it hit different to hear from Black mothers and to understand the issue of police brutality and how it affects the Black community. It's different when you're listening to Black mothers and their lived experiences, and it's a different set of truths. And so wanted to hear, kind of how the film came to be and why the focus on Black mothers.
Yeah, sure. This project actually started as a short film, right? It was 2017, and I was working at the Center for Investigative Reporting, which is a Bay Area news organization. And I was a video journalist for a show. We had a series called The Aftermath. And the idea was each episode would go and tell, revisit a big story that was once a news headline, and then we moved on, and we didn't get many updates about it. We got a Gracie Award for that series. And one of the segments that I really wanted to go back to and tell the aftermath story on was the case of Oscar Grant, right? And so the first thing that I did was I called Wanda Johnson. I went to the Oscar Grant Foundation website and I found her contact information, and I told her I wanted to do an aftermath story about the case of her son. But at that moment, I was just thinking about, focusing on her personal journey. And at that moment, she told me that it was February, and she told me over the phone, this is the month of Oscar Grant's birthday, and I organize every year a gathering of moms, which she can tell you more about, but basically, so she calls that gathering the Oscar Grant Legacy Weekend. And as she explained to me over the phone, she would gather mothers from all around the country, other mothers of victims of police brutality. And she, she let me come and film that weekend. And I remember, I showed up with 2 cameras, and I was really expecting, it's going to be a very difficult weekend emotionally, because I'm going to hear about all those stories. But what unfolded in front of my camera lens was something very powerful, right? Just to seeing that community of mothers helping one another and nurturing one another. Wanda was mentoring them, and they were exchanging resources and strategies, and I just thought that was a very inspiring story that I had not seen in the media yet. And just having the moms, being there, being the voice of their children. So I just left, and I knew that there should be a larger story, to cover about that. And that's how, Black Mothers Love and Resist came about.
Reverend Wanda, when Deborah first contacted you, what was your first reaction, and what did, as you got involved with the project, what were you hoping would come out of it?
Well, I really didn't know at the time when she first got involved with me. I just thought that she would be following me and just getting some footage and maybe do some kind of article with it. I had no idea that a documentary would be formed. She had told me that she was putting it together and working on it, but I had no idea a documentary was going to be formed.
Back to you, Reverend Wanda. First of all, I mean, it's a feature film, and the length is what it is. It could go on and on and on and on. And part of that is so traumatic and so sad to know that it can go on and on, as we go back in history in this issue of police brutality and Black mothers losing their children to police brutality. When, in the film, we meet many other Black mothers, and you've made it your mission, since losing your son, to support other mothers. Talk to us about, how continuing on this work has empowered you and empowered the community to keep on fighting.
When Oscar was first killed, I had no idea that we would even form a legacy weekend. I had no idea that I would even be calling mothers from all over to come and have this weekend of healing, is what it really is. And when I first set up to do one, it was really in a small magnitude. There was very few of us there. And we just cried and laughed and cried and laughed. And I began to think about, truly, we have lost something that can never be replaced. And so many mothers go into depression. The mental health is not good any longer. Some do drastic things. And there's some that I know that have lost their child, and years later they ended up passing away themselves. And so I began to pray about it and think about how could it be an impact for mothers who have lost their loved ones. So I started, bringing mothers from all over the United States to come for this weekend, where they would have a physical therapist there, they would have a psychologist there, a psychiatrist, they would have someone who can do exercise with them, pamper themselves, someone from essential oils would come, and just really encourage the mothers, to continue to propel forward even in the midst of their loss. Because when you lose, a child, it's very hard to continue to go forward and just continue to go right where you left off at. And it's very hard. And so in that, we began to have families just come. And as the families came, we began to provide healing and support for them.
Deborah, as you decided to go from a short film to a feature film that, is such a different scale of effort and everything, and lining, distribution and production, all of that, as well as further reaching out to other mothers and stories to tell. Take us a bit through that and what was involved, and was there anyone you wanted to be able to include that you were not able to?
Mm-hmm. Yes, when I should say, when I left that meeting, I still had to work on my short film. So it took a while until the feature film started shaping, right? I didn't even know if it was going to be possible for me to continue the feature film, right? Because I think that short was published about a year after I first met Wanda. So it was like, a long timeline. But we published the short and it aired on PBS. And as many filmmakers do, I use the short as a concept, as a proof of concept to pursue a feature film. And that whole thing was like a very, very long process, because feature films, require so many more resources. As an independent journalist, you have to seek those fundings and to be able to even, continue shooting your film. Right now, I'm in this environment, in this situation where I don't have a news organization backing me up, and I'm, applying for grants and trying to get more support for the project. At that moment, what I did was what many filmmakers would do. I didn't know where the story would go, at that moment. So I kept showing up to Wanda's meetings. I attended so many Oscar grant vigils that she hosted in name of her son, and I continued to follow this story, even though I didn't know where this was going. Fast forward, I heard about this case in Alabama, and I traveled to Alabama to meet Angela Williams, who is the second mother that we are profiling. And one thing that actually, to back up a little bit, when we published the short film, I got so many calls, so many mothers of victims or mothers who lost loved ones for other cause would contact me and really ask me if I could put them in touch with Wanda Johnson, because we didn't put a phone number for her gathering on the short film. So this happened so often that people would reach out to me. And I remember when I met Angela Williams, the first thing she said, she was like, there was a lot of support towards my case when I first exposed what happened to my son in the media. And she said, I really need to connect with Wanda Johnson. And I remember, fast forward several months later, I was filming with Wanda and I told her about Angela Williams. And Wanda told me, my family lives in Alabama, and actually they forwarded the case of Angela Williams to me. And if I'm not mistaken, your cousin, Wanda, had attended a rally for Angela?
That is correct. My cousin, yes.
Yes. And then I told her about this, and Wanda was very generous, about connecting with her. And I remember, time passed. One day I was traveling again to Alabama to film an update on Angela's story. And she was basically organizing community members to discuss the outcome of a grand jury, that there was no indictment to the police officers who beat her son. And she told me, well, and Wanda is actually, I've been communicating with her, and she is actually calling one of my meetings. And at that moment, I just thought that I couldn't, I should document that moment as well. And that's how, the documentary started to evolve from there, just like focusing on those two cases. But I should say it was very challenging, in the span of 5 years, there were so many cases happening. And when you are covering those stories, there is an urge, like people would call me, oh, you should cover this case. Stephon Clark happened. E.J. Bradford happened in Alabama. You should cover. It's really, for me, I had just to make a decision. I want to stay with those two stories, because the intention of my film is to stay with these families on their day-to-day lives, to cover their day-to-day challenge. So I was really seeking that intimacy, and not trying to cover everything.
To your point, Deborah, I'm, as the person watching this, I think that one of the striking narratives is the fact that, Black mothers have this horrible tragedy as something in common. And, for someone like myself, it's like, this should not be a commonality. It shouldn't be, something that brings folks together for. And so, Reverend Wanda, if you could also share your thoughts to, Deborah's point in meeting so many other mothers who want to share their stories. Yes, in itself, that is trauma. It's sad, but there's a sense of urgency for, we have to tell these stories.
And you're absolutely right. You think about when Mimi Till, Emmett Till, when he was killed, how she was going to let the world know what happened to her son. And for years, it has been a silence in the land with African-American or Black young men being amplified, that they have lost their lives. And so one of the things that really, struck me is that, the media often demonizes this child, and it makes society think that child, got what he deserved, or shouldn't be here in the first place. And so I had to come to grips to say, you know what, that was my child or that was their child, and that child deserved to live, did not deserve to be killed the way that they were killed. And so we had to change the narrative. We had to let our society know that this is still happening. And we have to bring awareness to it. And we have to come to the fact that all lives are important, that there's not a person who's living on this earth that cannot be redeemed, right? And so I always tell mothers, no matter what society is saying about your child, God allowed you to birth that child for whatever reason. And you're going to be the only voice for that child. And no matter what anyone says, you have to be that voice that will raise awareness and consciousness concerning your child. And so I continue to share that with mothers because they sometimes feel in a hopeless situation because of what happens with their child and then what the world is saying about their child. And I always say, don't listen to what the world was saying because only you know that child the way that you know that child. And if you don't speak up for that child, no one else will. And so that's why I had to do that for Oscar, along with my family being right there supportive doing it. And yelling, letting people know that Oscar's life was valuable. We tell other families that your child's life is valuable and your child didn't deserve to die that way. And so you have to be the one to speak up and out for your child.
And Deborah, I wanted to bring this up exactly what Reverend Wanda was saying. The film also gives you a chance to look at this, not from the perspective of it being cases or a situation where, if a video is shared online, you get to contribute your unwanted opinion, whether wanted or not, but you understand what I'm saying. The racists come out, or people who don't know all the facts come out and add their 2 cents online. But what this film does is it listens and it believes Black mothers. There's a scene in which Angela, she's talking about, they're listening to some audio that was submitted to the court with regards to her son's situation. But she says, why can't the grand jury or the juvenile court even, why can't they hear what I hear? Mm-hmm. And that was so profound for me because I feel like that is a big problem that society, that our communities have, is that we are not listening to Black mothers. Talk to us about how this film listens to Black mothers.
I'm very passionate about this question because, it's such an important point, right? As journalists, I know that whenever this type of case happened, the police shapes their narrative on the news, right? They have such power. From spending so much time with Angela and Wanda, I just learned there was so much more to their stories that we don't learn because, we see them on the media, we see mothers on the media, we know they exist, but we see them, but we don't hear them. And I wanted the film to be with them and hear them. I wanted the film to be, to tell their stories from their perspectives, right? And I think this is so important. And I think this goes back to why I made this film, right? I made this film because I felt that even though we know who are the mothers of the movement, but there is a gap in reporting that shows the everyday challenge that these mothers have to face, right? In the film, you get a glimpse of the work that Wanda had to go through to have the BART board recognize and acknowledge what happened to Oscar Grant and make a memorial for him. In the film, you learn, as you mentioned, Angela Williams talking about the grand jury, which, by the way, was formed by majority of white members, right? And so I wanted this to be her perspective, because so often we hear the police perspective in the media, right? So I wanted the film to really fill this gap.
Sorry, I had to step away there for a moment for a housing emergency, but so I hope I'm not going to ask a question that's already been asked, but so the film is kind of getting out there in some previews and festivals. What sort of feedback are you getting from, I assume there are some police officers or police organizations who are seeing it? Is it hostile, or are they reaching out and saying, yeah, this is a problem? I mean, where's that feedback, if you're getting any at all from them?
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell, because next week will be our world premiere. This is the first time we are showing the film. But I also want to emphasize that, throughout the filmmaking process, and even though this is a film that, value or highlights the mother's perspective, we still had a team of journalists reaching out to the police officers who are mentioned in the film, who are referenced to in the film. We still had to do our due diligence as journalists, right? It's been 4 years now since, the son of Angela Williams, Ulysses Wilkerson, was brutally beaten by officers of Troy Police in Alabama. And it's been 4 years that we are pressing for, as journalists, right? She's pressuring, the police as a family to have it released to the public. But also as journalists, we have been, contacting the police department and authorities in Alabama to try to get our hands on that video as media members. And we received rejection after rejection. There was no comment. So I just wanted to say that even though this is about, to emphasize the voice of moms, but we try to get, their perspective in the case, but there was no response from them.
Reverend Wanda, it's been 13 years, a little over 13 years since we lost Oscar, and about 12 years, right, since you founded the Oscar Grant Foundation. And so throughout the entire time, I believe the case there's something, actually, I'll be honest, I don't know what the update is on the Oscar Grant case. Could you give us an update?
I'm sure. Actually, Officer Peroni at the time, who really instigated the whole situation that propelled to my son being killed and losing his life, we had originally requested that they file charges against him. And they said that they would file charges after the trial. And they did not want to file charges before the trial because they wanted to use him as a witness. Well, he ended up turning into a hostile witness, and the information that they wanted to get from him, the district attorneys could not get it. And so we have been rallying and asking the district attorney to do her job, and that is to file charges against Peroni for what happened with my son. And so the district attorney had said that she wasn't going to file charges. And so the Attorney General, Attorney Rob Bonta, is looking into the case to see if there is some kind of charges that could be filed. Now, we realize that many of the charges that could have been filed at the very beginning, since they weren't, some of them have gone through the statute of limitations. But what we're trying to get charged is that he be charged actually along with what Messerly was charged with, the murder of my son, and allow him to go to court just like Messerly and have his day in court. That's all we're asking, is that the system would work fairly, and give us that opportunity, because if it would have been a flip side, we know that Oscar, he would have been charged and his friends would have been charged. Everyone else with him would have been in charge and in jail. And so that's all we're saying, is that the way the system is set up, it should operate equally for all. And we know that it's not doing that. And so we're looking, Attorney Rob Bonta, he's looking into it now to make a determination on if Pirelli is going to be charged.
I want to stay with you, Reverend Wanda. Could you talk about the founding of the Oscar Grant Foundation and how the idea came about and how the kind of scope of its work developed and what you do there?
Sure. So we were, the court was, the trial was moved to LA. And from that, there was many of the community members who had came to LA to support. And we were treated very rudely and unfairly during the trial. The people, my family members, we all had to wait outside to get a lottery ticket. And if your number wasn't called, you couldn't even go into the courtroom. The judge was like, we're going to have these protesters. If you don't get them out of here, we're going to have this case last for 5 years. There was a number of even the way the district attorney, they didn't even want them in there in a room to review their material. It was, not just the whole case, the way that the whole policing system started to act towards not just my family, but even the district attorney at that time, David Stein. And so we had everyone come together at the end, and we had several meetings, and we was having a young lady who was going to help us form the foundation at that time. And so she started the paperwork on it, and she didn't complete the paperwork. So my brother completed the paperwork, and he started working with the foundation, him and I, and he began to lead it to help me to continue to heal. And so we've been in force since then. This year, our goal is to offer students, we have our application online to offer students to sign up for a scholarship. We're giving $30,000 out in scholarships funds this year. We do a backpack school giveaway where we adopt a school and find out how many students are in that school, and we supply backpacks and school supplies for them. We founded a AAU basketball team where we have now 3 basketball teams from students in the Bay Area. We go to AAU different tournaments, and there have an opportunity to win. This year, our goal, one of the teams have already went to Texas A&M to get a tour because we want to really work with our youth to let them know that it's important to try to bridge that gap, to let them know that they're important in the society, and whatever tools we can give to them to help them become successful, we will provide those tools. We have several who have graduated and are in the process of graduating, who have went to really good schools, Dartmouth School. We have others who went to UC Berkeley. And so we're really excited that we can help our youth because they are our tomorrow. And if we don't start investing in them, instead of the way the society is set up, being able to tell if the youth is going to go to prison or going to go to college in the 3rd grade, if we don't provide ways to invest more in our youth instead of building prison systems, then we've become a failure ourselves as parents and as a next generation of people. And so that's our goal. Oscar loved people. He loved to help people. In the movie Fruitvale Station, I don't know if any of you have seen that, but there's a scene of a lady who didn't know how to purchase fish. Well, Oscar called home. He spoke to my mom, and he was asking, Grandma, I have a lady on the line. He's at work, and she needs to know how to cook fish. And my mom is giving her instructions on how to cook that fish, so those things are real. People was important to Oscar. He loved to help people. And so what better way to have a foundation that can turn around and help those who are in need. And so, families who have lost their loved ones, we offer a life after loss session where they could get on and they are encouraged. And if they need to see a psychiatrist, we're able to say, call that psychiatrist, set up that appointment, and pay for a few sessions for them, and all that. We all know that all that takes finances. So, of course, if, anyone wanted to donate to the Oscar Grant Foundation, they could do that. We definitely want to continue to help and make an impact in our society. And how do we do that? By helping our youth today, because in reality, they're going to be our tomorrow. And if we don't invest in them now, the prison systems will invest in them. The jail systems will invest in them. And we definitely don't want that. We want our youth to become leaders in our society.
Thank you for that. And I know you can follow the foundation on Twitter at Oscar Grant for Life, the numeral 4, Oscar Grant for Life. And is there a website as well?
Yes, it is OscarGrantFoundation.org.
Great, thank you. Michelle?
Sure. Deborah, I don't want to give away too many, I don't want to give away the film. It's really hard because again, thank you so much for the film. And it's informative, but it also, like I said, gives you a very important insight to this issue if you're passionate about breaking or fighting against racism and calling for equity. But the mothers come together and they do share ideas of what they think are solutions to this epidemic of police violence and the Black community. And a couple of them say, the whole system needs to be torn down and rebuilt. What is the takeaway from this film, you feel? What do you want the audience to take away? Is it everything? Is it about, listening to Black mothers, to the real solutions, to, tell us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, there is an author, her name is Adrienne Maree Brown, and she says that those closest to the problem are closest to the solutions. And I feel like this is one of the takeaways, right? Women like Wanda have been in this journey, in the aftermath of such a terrible incident, but she is paying forward the lessons that she learned as she navigated this very difficult justice system, right? And now she's paying forward and passing those lessons to other mothers. And just following her on these 5 years and just seeing her mentoring other moms and saying, if you want this to happen, you have to do, she's giving them a blueprint for justice, right? And I think this is so powerful. We like to think, normally we think that police brutality is an unsolvable problem, an intractable problem, but by watching Wanda, I have hope, by seeing what she's doing, her work with these mothers. So I think one of the takeaways, I want that, by sharing Wanda's story of resilience, resourcefulness, and also the victories that you see, when you watch the film, I hope this film will really inspire audiences around the country and offer them a model of a blueprint, a model for justice, because a lot of the tools that she teaches other moms can be transferable, to other communities who are also fighting oppressive systems. But I hope it's okay. But there are a couple other takeaways, that I really want the audience to take out when they watch this film. Throughout the filmmaking process, I was reading a book by a brilliant author. Her name is Dani McClain. She's a journalist and also a Black mother. And she wrote this book called We Live for the We, the political power of Black motherhood. And the idea of her book is that Black mothers have been serving our communities. They have been engaged in the system of mothering other moms and mothering our communities, but their work historically is overlooked, is undervalued. And in general, Black women's work are often forgotten from history, right? Their contributions. So I think with my film, I'm also trying to fill this gap, is showing, making their labor and their contributions to our society visible. Let's talk about these women. Let's support them, right? And so I think this is very important. As a last goal, not last, I have so many goals, but I also want this film to call to the attention for the need of self-care, especially for Black women, right? In the film, you see how activism work takes a toll on people. You see through the story of Wanda and Angela, how activism takes a toll on their lives. It's hard work, it affects your health. And, Audre Lorde once said that caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and is an act of political warfare. She reminds us that self-care is revolutionary. So I really want to call, audience to start this conversation about the need for self-care. And this is something that Wanda knows really well, because by following her, I know that this was one of her messages to other mothers that she was mentoring.
Wanda, tell us how you became a mentor. I mean, obviously other mothers have gone through this horrible tragedy. How did you put yourself in a position or feel called to be of assistance to other mothers? And what specifically do you hope, what do you hear them asking for most?
A lot of, when you lose a loved one, a lot of times we as people try to go with the solution to that problem, and you can't fix it. A lot of times what I've learned is that we have to learn how to be good listeners. We don't always have to have an answer for the question or for the statement said, but we have to learn how to be good listeners. And so when Michael Brown was killed, his mother, Leslie, was in a state of shock, like myself. She was in a state of unbelief. She was in a state of, what do I do? Not knowing what to do. And oftentimes the community wants to throw you out there as an advocate or a person who's yelling and all this stuff. But the bottom line is, she was Michael's mother. So my words to her, because she didn't know what to do. And I have been through the process of losing my son. And so I went to her, and the same thing I said to Trayvon Martin's mother. You're the mother. That was your child. No one can take those memories away from you. And no one can change how you feel about your child. And so you're the voice that your child has. And if you want someone to know something about your child, you're going to have to be the voice that shares that very thing. And I share with them how in our society, there was negativeness around all of our children. And our society feels different when they hear the negative versus the positive. So I began to pray with Leslie and share with her, you have to change that narrative by sharing who your child was or is. And you have to change that narrative by standing up and saying, it doesn't matter whatever happened, my child did not deserve to die. And so I knew that I needed to do that for mothers, because you feel helpless. You don't know what to do, right? And being able to encourage them to fight for their children helped me to also get stronger. It helped me to begin to turn that so great a pain that I was feeling into a purpose, right? You know, I was a minister before Oscar was killed. And so I have believed that the Lord showed me that Oscar and I would be in ministry together. And when Oscar was killed, I was like, well, God, you said we would be in ministry together. How are we in ministry together? And the Lord began to tell me to look around. He began to show me that many of the faces that I'm seeing is because of what happened with Oscar. And so we're not in the Orthodox ministry that I thought we would be in, but in a sense, we really still are in ministry together, because I'm meeting everyone on this session today because of what happened with Oscar, in a sense, even though it's a movie, a documentary that Deborah made. But if Oscar had not been killed, I probably wouldn't be a part of the documentary. And so I always share with mothers that you have to take care of yourself and be that voice for your child. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, then you can't be that voice, because you won't be able to say anything. And so with Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon Martin's mother, and with Leslie McBath, or Leslie Heed or McSpadden, I was able to share those things with them. And we've been able to come together and cry together, laugh together, support one another together, be on panels together. And we will continue to do that, because we don't want other mothers to have to join what we're in that we didn't want to be in. And so we continue to advocate in each of our states for our children, and for our neighbors' children, because our children are not here, but there's other children that we can shed light on and help so that it doesn't happen to other families.
Thank you so much for that, Reverend Wanda, and all your work. And with that being said, and everything that you had just said, turn the question back to Deborah, asked you before what your takeaways are, what you want people to take away from the film. But who do you think this film is for? You know, like who needs to see this film?
I think, of course, I want this film to be seen by as many people as possible. But I feel like, as a mother myself, I feel like I made this film to other mothers, you know, so they can be seeing, they can see that we are seeing their challenge on the big screen, that we are seeing their work being acknowledged. So I think first and foremost, this is a film for other mothers, for the mothers of the movement, right? I feel like whenever I was going out on a shoot, I was like thinking, I'm making this film for Wanda, right? I want her to be proud of this film. This has been in my mind for this 5 years. And of course, and I think everybody can really, you know, benefit from knowing, you know, this mother's challenge and what they have been doing, what are their contributions. I remember that, you know, in 2020, what we call the uprising, you know, when George Floyd was killed, for the first time, like we see that everybody's on the same page, that all of a sudden about the problem of police brutality now, right? Now everybody's seeing, you know, these families' pain, everybody's seeing that we need to make change, right? But at that point, I was thinking, it's been like, you know, we've been living with this problem for such a long time, right? Why now we are talking about this? Why only now this is relevant? So I think when people watch this film, I really want them to learn about all these challenges that families have to face. There's a whole community. Each case of police brutality leaves a whole community destroyed, traumatized, right? We need to learn, not only learn about this problem, but do something about it. Everybody is responsible for this problem. And so I really want as many people to see this.
You mentioned the George Floyd killing and the resulting protests and attention. I want to ask each of you the same question. I'll just start with you, Deborah. do you think we're in a better place, closer to getting corrections, changes, helpful or whatever, as a result of all this, the uprising and the protests and the focus, or are we as far apart or even farther than before? I mean, are you optimistic or pessimistic, I guess?
That's a very difficult question because, you know, if you look back in history, there were other moments of, you know, the civil rights movement, and then you would think that by now everything is resolved, but it's not. But on the other hand, it's also baby steps, right? I feel like progress is being made. And I just hope that we keep having these conversations going, not only when another case, you know, happens, that we are going to have these conversations. So I think bottom line is I have to be hopeful. You know, I have a child. I need to be hopeful, and I want to be hopeful. Sorry, this is kind of vague, but it's such a difficult question, right? Because progress has been made, but we are so far from being where we want to be. But I would love to hear Wanda's thoughts on this.
Please.
You know, I often think about Martin Luther King Jr. I think about how he had that dream and where his children would be able to hold hands with other nationalities of people. And I think about how that became a reality. And so I want to say that we have come some ways, but yet we still have a ways to go. And having a documentary like this can show people the real life things that we go through and how we have to pick up the pieces and continue. And so I want to say that we have come some ways. I think about AB 392 being passed. I think about the other laws that are being passed for records, for, you know, just different laws that we're working to get changed, and that we have to continue to fight that way. But one of the things that I really notice is that more eyes are being opened. From what happened with George Floyd, it didn't matter what color you were, or what color, at that time, what color you were. You saw something being done to someone that was not humane. You heard someone saying, you know, that they couldn't breathe. You heard an audience of people trying to get the officer to change his tactic or measure of brutality or measure of apprehending him a different way. And all of that we saw for those 9 minutes or how many ever minutes. And so people from that and other killings are seeing and responding and thinking differently when it comes to policing. And so because of that, I believe that we have changed some and that we still have a ways to go. And with us having the allies and the accomplices, which Tamika Mallory wrote a book, talked about allies and accomplishments in, having people standing up for what is right can continue and cause us to propel even forward in our quest for equal opportunity and equally treated by all and for all. And that no one is exclusive, but we're all inclusive at the tables. And so, yes, to answer, I do think there has been some change, but I also think that there is a lot more change that can occur. And it's going to take all of us on this session and everyone listening to step up and come together collectively and work to change our laws and the systemic things that our society has faced in the ugly face of racism.
Amen. Amen. I want to go back to AB 392. So the California law does permit law enforcement to use deadly force if a person is fleeing and or resisting arrest. But AB 392 would change that. Tell us how.
It has to be reasonable. So if a person is fleeing from you, right, that is not a threat to the officer. And so to shoot that person in the back, right, is really not warranted. It's not necessary. And so it would no longer permit those things to occur. And so we're saying that we have to come up with a way, besides the wording that we've heard over the years, I fear for my life, the person was resisting arrest, the person was going for his waist. We have to come up with, those can no longer be used to kill someone, right? It has to be, if you're having deadly force against you, or if that person is resisting arrest, we got to figure out, what do you mean resisting arrest? Is running resisting arrest? Of course not. You know, and, well, you may say it is, but of course not. It's not causing the officer to have to dictate and shoot and kill the person. And so we're AB 392 saying you can't do that. It has to be, no longer can you say that person was resisting arrest. It has to be proven. And that's what we're saying, because so many lives are being lost because the person is laying on the platform, as Oscar's case. The officer said he was resisting arrest at first, because if you go back and listen to the beginning of my son's case, you'll see that they had to change the narrative 4 times before they finally came up with the taser gun confusion. The first was he was resisting. The second was they thought he had a gun. The third was that he had his hands in the front of him. And then the fourth was the taser gun confusion. So we have to come up with a way that those excuses are no longer acceptable. And by all means, no one is saying that, at least I'm not saying that we don't need police. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we hire police to do their job and to do it fairly and to do it rightly. And if they're not going to do it that way, then we need to come up with a way where when these police are hired, that they're interviewed and they're trained correctly the way that they need to be trained to avoid these type of situations or from occurring.
As we're nearing the end of our talk here today, Reverend Wanda, tell us what's next for you and your work, and as well you and the foundation.
So we are actually working again on really writing out this blueprint so that other families can go can utilize the blueprint, and then we go to them like we've been doing and work with them to get it established and help them establish their foundations, help them establish how to walk the blueprint out. We're looking to, you know, our end goal for our youth is to be able to, you know, have some youth and we pay their full tuition right in school. Our goal, we've already are certified to go into these police stations, show them different clips and work with them on training of de-escalation, and show them the clips. Have mothers, you know, this documentary could be a great tool to use when we walk into the police. We want to show you a clip. We want to show you this young man who was brutally beat up by the police. We want to show you the clip of Oscar being killed by the police. Now, how could we avoid those things? So we want to begin to have people think thought-provoking conversations that will cause us to react differently when police encounters occur. That will cause us to act differently in our communities. And so we are really working on that, and hopefully to get it complete sometime this year, where we're able to really offer it to families all over the globe.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Same question for you, Deborah. I mean, I know what happens next after a world premiere. The world premiere, by the way, reminder, is next Friday. It's April 29th, and during the San Francisco Film Festival. And so get your tickets while you can. Deborah?
Yes. Well, yes, the screening next week, our premiere, I feel like it's the completion of our production process, right? But it's the beginning of a new journey of distribution now, right? My team and I, we have submitted the film to film festivals all around the country. We've got invitations for a few of them, and we are waiting to hear what is next for us. But basically, we're going to the festival circuit until we find distribution for the film. And also, right after the premiere, we are launching our impact campaign. As you might know, that films that expose or social issues like this one, we want to make sure that the film is being used as a tool by communities, and partly of what Reverend Wanda Johnson already said, we want to bring the film to other communities as a part of our impact campaign and make sure that, the film is making the impact that we intended it to make. Yeah.
I'm sure it will. I know that it has already impacted me, just the hour and a half that I spent watching it. So thank you so much for this film, Black Mothers Love and Resist. Like I mentioned, the world premiere is happening next Friday. So the only way you could see it next Friday is if you attend the San Francisco Film Festival. Hopefully distribution happens after that. I want to thank our speakers for joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much, Deborah Souza Silva, and also Reverend Wanda Johnson. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, John. Thanks for having us today.
Thank you for having me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you both, as well as thank you to all of the folks who are listening and watching online. You can find more programs at commonwealthclub.org. Stay safe and have a good weekend. Goodbye.